Thank you, ladies and gentlemen, for joining us again for the 6th International Conference on Action with Women and Peace. We will now start our first panel discussion of the day, and thank you for joining us back again. The first panel discussion will be held under the theme of UN Peacekeeping Missions operationalization of WPS mandates on promoting women's peaceful participation in the peace processes. A very timely and important theme to discuss. And on stage, we have our moderator who will lead us through the discussions and 5 panelists who will share their insights. So thank you once again for joining us. And now I'd like to introduce our moderator first for you, Dr. Louise Olsen, the Research Director of the Department of Global Politics, Norms and Societies, Peace Research Institute of Oslo. Please welcome her with a big round of applause, ladies and gentlemen. And with that, I turn the microphone and the floor over to our moderator.
Thank you, and thank you for the kind introduction. Excellencies, esteemed conference participants, ladies and gentlemen, peacekeeping is one of the international community's long-standing and most advanced joint tools for peace and security. Research also underlines that it's quite cost-effective. For instance, between July 2021 and 2022, the UN ran 20 operations with 87,000 deployed international staff for about 1/10 of the US defense budget, just to give one important global reference point. While peacekeeping faces many challenges, research has found that peace operations can help reduce both the risk of recurring conflict and violence against civilians. It can also contribute positively to women's security in terms of access to health and other resources, and it can assist improvements in women's empowerment post-war. Peacekeeping work also for participation also takes place in very difficult times in terms of the context of high levels of violence. So peacekeeping has also sought to develop tools for reducing both conflict-related sexual violence and other forms of political violence targeting women. And this often involves sort of mobilizing also women personnel in the peacekeeping operations. So reducing violence is important, of course, in and by itself, but reducing violence targeting women in the host population could, in turn, also support women's political engagement, what we call the protection-participation nexus. So these are important dimensions that I think frame the current and the very current panel discussions that we will have here today. And I think to bring forward this debate on peacekeeping and how it can support women's meaningful and sustainable participation and empowerment, I am very, very privileged to be joined by a range of panelists who have very complementary perspectives from the strategic, but also from peacekeeping operations in Africa and in the Middle East. So first I have Catherine Anderla, Chief of Gender Unit at the UN Department of Peace Operations. We have Kasumi Nishigaya, who is Chief of the Gender Unit and Senior Gender Advisor at the UN Mission in South Sudan, UNMISS. Agbeko Kofi Sudanyu, Gender Affairs Officer at the UN Multidimensional Integrated Stabilization Mission in the Central African Republic, MINUSCA. Cecilia Artsua, Force Gender Integration Mentor and Advisor at the UN Organizational Stabilization Mission in the Democratic Republic of Congo, MONUSCO. And Sun Jong-ji, Liaison Officer at the UN Disengagement Observer Force, UNDORF. And as I said, I feel very privileged to be part of moderating this at this important conference. And we will conduct the panel in 2 sections. The first will bring out examples and lessons learned of what it actually means in practice to support women's participation and also why this is important, both in terms of empowerment, but also in terms of how it relates to creating sustainable peace. The second section will then focus in on discussing more of the challenges that we are facing today, in terms of how we can ensure that the peacekeeping support to participation and empowerment also leads to long-lasting effects on the ground. This is especially critical now as some operations face rapid drawdowns and sometimes even closures. So a central area to take forward. And I think we will be very fortunate to be able to draw on the experiences of this panel to take this discussion forward. And finally, if we have time, we will also conclude the panel with a forward-looking, positive sort of expectations for the 25th anniversary period. So, then turning to the first section on the panel, starting with how peacekeeping operations actually work for creating and supporting women's meaningful participation. So, Ms. Andela, I would like to first turn to you and ask, from a more strategic perspective, how does the Department of Peace operation work to promote participation, both in terms of what it means for both peace and political processes, but also what you think have been determining factors for that we've learned over the last 25 years that have led to the existing practices in peacekeeping. So please, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Mrs. Olsen, and good morning to everyone. So I'm really looking forward to the discussion, but to address your question, I will present you the overarching context of the women, peace and security implementation and approach, and my colleagues will provide you with concrete examples. So, of course, we are operating in a comprehensive framework, which is starting with the landmark UN Security Council Resolution 1325 and the subsequent ones. We have also heard from USG Lacroix that for us, gender equality and WPS are a strategic and political imperative for peacekeeping. This is enshrined also in the Agenda for Peace initiative. We have also other instruments like our gender responsive policy for peacekeeping missions that also provide responsibilities, roles of all peacekeepers. When I say all peacekeepers, it's really uniform and civilian personnel. And you can also see on the panel that both are represented here, so uniform and civilians. So that's the formal framework, and of course, in addition, the legal ones, including the international humanitarian law, and of course the international human rights. So that's how we operate. So it's really well settled, and that's why now that we have like this compelling framework, it's time to really implement the women, peace and security agenda and towards gender equality. Thank you.
Thank you so much. So if I now turn to the panelists who are working on this in practice on the ground, I was wondering if you can give some examples how you worked on this in peacekeeping to support participation, and also why this is important. Why should we dedicate? Why is it important to implement women, peace and security and improve women's participation? And I think reflecting on it both in terms of empowerment, but also to improve mission outcomes for peace overall. So I'd like to first turn to Ms. Nishigaya. Could you reflect on these questions from how you see it in the South Sudan context?
Thank you very much for the introduction, and good morning to everybody, and thank you very much for the invitation for this important conference organized by the Republic of Korea. I tried to bring to this discussion a field perspective that is taking place in the UN mission in South Sudan. I am Senior Gender Advisor working in this mission, also responsible for creating gender responsiveness and of all the mission mandated tasks with the goal of achieving some elements of women, peace and security agenda that are relevant to the mission mandate. We are not necessarily implementing the Security Council resolution per se, but we are 1325 per se, but we are implementing the mission-specific mandate given by the Security Council, 2729. We actually have altogether 17,000 troops and then 2,000 civilian personnel. So it's very much a large mission, multidimensional, and spread out across the country in 10 different areas of operation. We are characterized currently by the compounded effects of ongoing intercommunal conflict and stagnated peace agreement. Also, the impact felt by climate change, conflict from Sudan, among others. So I would describe the suffering of civilians enormous, and it's really go beyond our understanding. Turning to your questions about examples, it's very difficult to select, but I want to prioritize here, focusing on the peace agreement that we do have. In 2018, the revitalized agreement on the resolution of the conflict in South Sudan was signed by the parties of the peace agreement, and power sharing arrangement made an entry point, critical entry point for more women to enter into the mechanism and the institution of the peace agreement, including the government, legislative assemblies, and also ceasefire monitoring mechanism, among others. So for us, it was very important to support those who are newly appointed into those public offices under the peace agreement and power sharing arrangement. And as you know, those who are new into those offices are relatively less experienced. And most of them come from the younger generation of the public decision makers and a segment of the signatories' power. So we are tasked to basically support and mentor those women who are appointed into the leadership positions. For just give you an example about the newly appointed member of parliament, for example, we have focused on the parliamentary procedures, legislative processes, and also formation of the key institutions like women caucus in the parliament, gender budgeting, and gender screening of the legislations, among others. Currently, we are facing the situation of constitution-making process and electoral process, so our attention is very much focusing on that, building the capability of the next generations of women leaders who are taking those important roles in constitution making and public decision making. Now, South Sudan is also having refugees and IDPs because of the previous conflict that took place in 2013 and 2016. So over 4 million of South Sudanese are currently taking asylum, 2 million of them taking asylum outside of South Sudan, and considered to be like 2 million equivalent is also internally displaced. So in order to make peace process very inclusive, we actually started consultation with IDPs and refugees across the country and also in neighboring countries like Ethiopia and Uganda about their perspectives about constitution making and electoral processes. We have done so during the last financial year. Turning to protection issues, you know, so many women suffered from sexual gender-based violence during the conflict, including sexual gender-based violence in conflict. So it is very important for security sector institutions to be transformed to cater for the needs of the women's protection, which means, you know, gender-responsive security services in order to protect those who are already affected by the crimes and taking them to services, among others. Creating enabling environment for women to be able to participate in the security sector is also very important. So we have supported the creation of women's networks in all 6 security sector institutions in South Sudan. Why the work is so important in terms of participation and what kind of results we should deliver. I think it's one of those messages that dignitaries already delivered at the congratulatory remarks. I think the first point is support for participation is imperative, actually, especially where there are deeply entrenched social customs. In the country like South Sudan, we have the practices such as bride price, and also early child and forced marriages, sometimes against young girls who are as young as 13. So I think it's very important that participation, especially having those voices reflected in the peacekeeping activities, especially the protection activity, is totally imperative. Another thing also mentioned earlier is that women's participation is actually not only a good thing to do, but also it's democratic and human rights principles that the UN is promoting, in addition to also operational effectiveness in the peacekeeping activities. We are the trend setters for international humanitarian law and international human rights laws and conventions. So promoting the compliant behavior is very important for us among the national stakeholders, as well as also promoting equality, diversity, and inclusion. I think also the former force commander highlighted the fact that understanding situations more comprehensively is very important. Inclusion of the women's information and voices are totally imperative in comprehending the situations related to conflict and security, and sometimes even early warning indicators, because women have different communication loops and different type of communication to tell the mission what is happening. The results we can expect is actually a balanced and equal participation of women and men, and that should result in the creation of critical awareness among, not only among women, just because of women, peace and security agenda, but also among the whole range of stakeholders. Early child and forced marriage, for example, that form the causes of discrimination and inequality against women and girls, involves not only about women, but also family members, especially mothers and fathers, and also community members, faith-based organizations, among others, traditional leaders, among others. So it is very important for all those stakeholders to get involved in consultation and creating a critical awareness about that. The second part is, it is a kind of natural ripple effect that we have witnessed, that knowledge and experience sharing and transfer is happening among women and for women, especially from older and more experienced women to younger generations of women, sometimes even as young as 15 to 16, those who are going to be the voters in 2 years' time.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. I think you bring up a lot of important points, and I think also in relation to the fact that we quite often need to see peace processes as large-scale political processes, and that's also where participation and influence comes in. Mr. Soninu, can you tell us your thoughts on these questions and give some examples from the Central African Republic?
Thank you very much for the floor. Good morning, everyone. I'm Kofi from MINUSCA, Central African Republic. So, coming to the question, I will say that peacekeeping operations use good offices, you know, to interact with the government and advocate for the inclusion of women in the security, peace, and governance mechanism put in place at both national and local levels. So in the case of MINUSCA, for example, we can note the high-level engagement from the SRG, who call upon all the stakeholders to invest in WPS agenda. Also, we can say that the implementation of WPS agenda, as well as the gender equality, is done at both the mission, but also national level. So it's a matter that is implemented at different levels. At the mission level, we have a gender strategy that is implemented, and we are working with all components, civilian, police, and military components, to advise on how to integrate the gender perspectives in the service delivery, so to make the peacekeeping more gender responsive, you know. So at this level, I think many components are now working, you know, even if it is challenging, but we think we are moving, because in terms of protection of civilian, we provide capacity building for police and military, so that the protection of civilian can be more gender responsive in terms of patrols, in terms of engagement with the local community, and so on. But at the national level, we are working with a range of stakeholders, including NGOs, civil society organizations, but also with the government institutions. So at the local level, we work with, we train women, we build capacities of women on peaceful conflict resolution, mediation, social cohesion, and reconciliation, because we believe that, and my predecessors and the high level that provided the speech mentioned that when women are involved, so this increases the probability of having peace agreement. So they are working with security actors to hold dialogues on how they can be protected, because women should be also actors of their security. They are not only people that need protection, but they should be key actors. When we take example of the dialogue and peace agreement happened in 2019 in Khartoum, there was a large consultation of women organizations to collect their concerns and needs that were discussed around the table in Khartoum, and they were part of the peace agreement signature. So this make a difference. This make a difference, and we believe that women have capacities to, to influence processes. In terms of participation in political processes, we identify women potential candidates, and we are reinforcing their capacities, so that, because we cannot ask from women to be involved in political issues without giving them tools and means to do so. So we put in place, we establish platforms of women engaged in politics around the country, and they are in charge of mobilizing communities around the issue of women participation. We identify also factors that impede women participation, like cultural issue. Cultural issue is held by traditional leaders, religion leaders, and youth as well. So we raise awareness with all those actors to explain the importance of women participation and what is the added value. So I think those actors commit to support women participation during the upcoming local elections. So I think for the sake of the time, yeah, I will stop here. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And I think you also, together with Ms. Nishigaya, you really point out sort of how 1325 has really been made more concrete and translated into a mandate. And then it's a cooperation between the government and the peacekeeping to translate this into activities in order to actually promote participation, just like you're saying, the importance of putting it into action. Captain Erzua, could you tell us about your work on this in the DRC, please?
Thank you. Thank you for having me. I'm Captain Ezwa, a Ghanaian military officer, and I just ended my 3rd peacekeeping mission in the Democratic Republic of Congo as the gender integration mentor and advisor. With this discussion, I'm also going to bring to the fore some of my experiences. My first mission was in Lebanon, and then my second was in Abyei. And so cumulatively, I hope that this submission will cover all these areas. Regarding the question of how we peacekeepers, we help in the supporting the WPS agenda, I would group it into 2. As a peacekeeper, you know that we have the uniform component and the civilian component. So I'll speak more to the uniform component. First and foremost, it is essential that women are included in the deployment. So you are propounding an agenda of inclusivity. Therefore, on ground, we should see women also being deployed among the troops. Hence, the need to increase the numbers of women peacekeepers. So all TCCs, just like Ghana, are making effort to increase the deployment of women as part of their peacekeepers. Then in the peacekeeping mission, we have the troops, we have the military observers, we have the military staff officers, all being military component. As a troop or a troop contributing country or a member of a troop contributing country, the peacekeeping mission has ensured that we have introduced what we call the engagement platoon. So the engagement platoon is made up of men and women who are deployed with the various battalions. And in MONUSCO, my responsibility was to ensure in-mission training of the engagement platoon. Their main work is to go out, interact with the community. So it has been observed over the years that just patrolling within the community and not having a face-to-face interaction does not yield much benefit. Hence, the engagement platoon, who are represented by 50-50 men and women, replicating how essential it is for us to include women and men in all we do. Then we also have, I wouldn't belabor the point on gender advisors. We have the gender advisors, we have the gender focal point officers, and I must say that my appointment as a gender integration mentor and advisor was created by the mission leadership because they realized there was the need for somebody to mentor, train, and advise. I must say that until I came to this sphere, I didn't know much about WPS agenda. So it is very easy to assume that because we are uniform personnel, we know. It's not true. Just a few people know at the top hierarchy. But for the agenda to be successful, it must be decentralized to the lowest level. So that is why I was there to train the battalions. It is when these women in uniform know why they are there, then it boosts their confidence to also interact and then help the battalion. So why do we do this? We do this because, one, by our inclusion in the patrols and in the training in our operations, we get better information. It is very normal to go into a society where we have women. Some women are not comfortable speaking to men because of the societal norms or their exposure to certain threats. So they find it easy speaking to women. In the same light, we have men who are not comfortable speaking to women. So we have men to speak to such. And then there are also environments where having both of us helps to ginger the conversation. So for the benefit of peacekeeping and why it is essential, we are able to gain better information, and we are also able to better plan our activities to include everybody. Then lastly, we represent the best practice, whereby we want to encourage inclusion of women. Hence, we replicate what we are preaching out there. So thank you.
Thank you so much. And I think you point to many important points, but I think one in terms of that different parts of an operation also fill different roles. So when we're thinking about how we promote peacekeeping, it's really, as you point out, very critical what kind of role do you have in the operation, but also then the responsibilities of those that contribute to peacekeeping to make sure that each unit has the right capacity. So if you're a troop contributing country, make sure you have the capacity of your troops to contribute. Very important points. Lieutenant Colonel Ye, could you tell us about this from an observer mission perspective?
Good morning, everyone. Firstly, I would like to thank to every relevant entities for these meaningful events, especially for our mission leadership. Even current situation, they allowed me to attend this meeting. And as a member of the peacekeeping mission in the Middle East, I also sincerely hope that the ongoing situation improves and is resolved through peaceful means. For the questions, I'd like to emphasize the difference between our mission in Middle East and also the African missions. Actually, we are working as a peacekeeper for traditional peacekeeping missions. It's totally different with the multidimensional missions. Actually, Cecilia mentioned about Lebanon. I'd like to example lies the UNIFIL case and also my current mission UNDOF case. I also served for UNIFIL before. In UNIFIL, we had the female peacekeepers, the engagement team with the Ghanaian officers or Ghanaian members, or even for the staff officers of each contingent. We had the kind of the market walks, operations, weekly base, and it allowed us to engage with the local population, mostly women's. These interactions respected the cultural norms of the host nations, while allowing us to gain invaluable insight into communities' concerns. This approach not only enhanced the trust between the mission and local population, but also showcased how female peacekeepers can act as a cultural bridge in a complex environment. Currently in UNDOF, we have 10% of total personnel, and also the 20% of the staff officers are female now. We have the opportunity to demonstrate female peacekeepers or female military personnel's capabilities in professional military roles. This is particularly significant in a region where some kind of advanced militaries are only recently integrating women into combat positions. By performing our duties in operational roles, we provide a visible model for what gender integration can achieve in military effectiveness and cohesion. For example, during reagent activities, as my main duty with host nation counterparts, inclusion of female officers facilitated discussions on gender integration in a way that would have been less impactful coming from all male team. That's the reason why we are, as a member of the reagent team, as a female peacekeepers. These experiences across different missions have shown me that women's participation in peacekeeping is not just about representation. It's about creating opportunities to demonstrate how gender inclusivity enhances mission outcomes. While the context may differ, like the multidimensional missions or traditional missions, the value of diverse teams and the impact of women in peacekeeping remain constant. I strongly believe that by continuing to highlight these contributions, we can inspire more missions and national militaries to promote gender integration, ultimately strengthening the effectiveness of peacekeeping operations worldwide. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I think it's very interesting what you say about the recruitment of women for military components of peacekeeping. When I started 25 years ago, it was assumed that this was something that we could never change, and now it's actually one of the larger debates in the WPS context. But I think you also point out the fact that when we're implementing and talking about how do we improve participation and security of the women in the host population, that we have to understand that gender is an organizing principle in all societies, but each society has solved this in slightly different ways. So one size does not fit all, but it's important in all contexts. It just has to be adapted. And I think that is one of the major progressions we have seen in the work of the Department of Peace Operations by really making this very, very concrete. So I think what you have all described are very important examples of the how and the why of sort of how peacekeeping works to support meaningful participation. And these kind of examples are also very important for intermission learning. But there is one challenge that research points out, and that is that we sort of need to think about how do we make sure that these important contributions lead to long-lasting effects in empowerment. So how do we contribute to that? There's a study by Blanton et al. That finds that peacekeeping are associated with improved levels of empowerment in the host society. But when the peacekeeping mission withdraws, the empowerment level also slightly reduced, and some contexts also see increased levels of violence against women. So how we sort of think around the sustainability of our contributions is really, really key. And this has, of course, been really underlined by the fact that now we are also seeing demands for rapid closure or accelerated drawdowns in some contexts, like we've seen in Mali and Sudan. And interestingly, also in Mali and Sudan, the Security Council itself did not include WPS in the resolutions that actually ended these missions. And the UN Secretary General has also underlined that there is often a lack of funding for this work. So therefore, sort of drawing on your experiences in the panel, sort of how do we then make sure that all of these sort of contributions can last? Turning first to you, Ms. Anderley, if you can give us some answers on this and recommendations from the DPO perspective.
Thank you. So I will now come to a very political answer to your question, because obviously at this point there should be a strong political will. Political will not just from the host country, but also from all member states. So that's really a shared and collective responsibility of all of us. We have heard from, based on those concrete examples from the field, we have repetitively heard from the community engagement. So then the localization agenda is very key. I mean, the participation of the local women organizations, local population, but mostly the woman is key. But the woman alone cannot really push for their own participation politically. They need support. They need support from us. This support is translated or should be translated in, first of all, at national level in a normative, institutionalized approach. And then beyond then the national countries, we have also at headquarters, at the Security Council, we have to have like shared commitment. And that's where I invite also Republic of Korea, especially now coming to the term on the Security Council next year, to also be part of the countries that are sharing commitment on advancing WPS. this is really important. We have also seen that having like key provisions or even benchmarks in mandates renewal. I mean, to have like more nuanced languages, it's very key in helping also not only the peacekeeping to effectively address WPS, but the host countries to also implement some of the benchmarks or provisions. But again, to have like those nuanced mandates, we need some information, and this information is based on the intelligence, on the information provided by the local population. But the ones that will really relay the information to the top or to the pen holders of those mandates resolution are the gender experts, are the gender advisors, organized with a coordination of gender focal points, etc. Again, I'm taking that up to the strategic level, to the member states, including the Republic of Korea, to insist about the importance of this capacity. When we talk about capacity and capabilities, we need gender experts, not only in number, but the positioning is also key. So we need senior gender experts, advisors that will lead the whole mission towards gender equality and to the implementation of effective women, peace and security.
Thank you so much for sharing this ongoing work. Turning to the panelists, and also please share if you have other examples from drawdowns and transitioning that Ms. Angela has really pointed out are critical. So starting with the Lieutenant Colonel G, could you tell us about how you see how you work for ensuring that women's sort of your contributions to empowerment become sustainable?
Firstly, I'd like to highly agree with the mentioning from the Andela, especially about the senior female gender advisor issue. Actually, I put the first issue about that. So first, I'd like to emphasize the necessity of the senior leadership of the mission as well. I mean, from the uniformed personnel. Actually, we are having our acting military advisor of the DPO, the General Cheryl Pierce now, and previously we had several commanders, force commanders in the mission, but we are still very needing for more female seniors. As a field peacekeeper, I'd like to say about the mid-level senior officers. I couldn't find any contingent commanding officers in the field, but I think the most important part of the peacekeeping mission is to have those kind of mid-level senior commanders. So for making more mid-level seniors in the military part, I think we have to make some kind of pipelines for female peacekeepers to improve or to encourage their participation and also to improve or to develop their careers in the peacekeeping world. In my case, I started the peacekeeping mission as a captain, very junior captain, like 12 years ago. And I was a staff officer of the contingent, Korean contingent in UNIFIL. And after that, I could have the opportunity to join UNMOGIP as a military expert. And then I participate the same mission again, a little bit higher position of the contingent, like a chief of the branch of the contingent. And now as a major level I'm working for the UNDOF as a liaison officer. And this kind of the career development is essential for female peacekeepers. So I'd like to emphasize this importance first. And secondly, I'd like to talk about the mission itself. as the example of the UNIFIL, we need to plan a kind of the structure or long-term program for enhancing WPS agenda in the mission. In UNIFIL, as I mentioned before, the market wars or the female engagement team program was really successful, and that transport or that kind of program handed over the rotations or the staff officers for each contingent or each batch. So it's the kind of the successful example of the mission, especially for the traditional mission. So I think the most of missions, even my current mission, should plan some kind of the long-term program for improve or the enhancing WPS agenda in the mission. Lastly, I'd like to talk about the building sustainable military-to-military networks. In my current mission, we had some kind of joint activities with the host nations before. Unfortunately, we cannot currently. But anyway, in this kind of activities, also to enhance the WPS agenda, not only for the mission, but also for the host nations. So by focusing on these strategies, repeat deployment or development of the career for female peacekeepers, and also structure the program and sustainable networks, we can make sure that the positive effect of the women's empowerment in peacekeeping operations are not just impactful, but also enduring. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And I think what Ms. Angela really pointed out, the fact that, and this really underlined, I think, by your presentation, is that these are very long-term, quite substantial challenges we're up against. There are ingrained in the political system, but also in our own organizations. So it sort of involves all of us. It's a shared burden, but also a shared work and a positive thing we can all learn from as well. And I think also in terms of connecting it very, very clearly to the leadership and the mandate and so what we are achieving. So I think those are really important points. So thank you for sharing that. Captain Sua, how do you work on this, and how do you also see your experiences on how we promote empowerment long term?
Thank you. So for us to ensure sustainability, I believe that you cannot give what you don't have. And the UN has over 190 member states. So if from the member states, we all continue with advocacy and awareness creation. In my earlier submission, I mentioned that even some peacekeepers themselves do not understand the WPS agenda. So how do I propel an agenda I don't understand? So it must start from home. All the member states should ensure continuous awareness creation, educating members, even before deploying them into peacekeeping, so that the concept becomes a norm. It shouldn't become something for the elite. If you don't get to a certain pedigree, you don't know about it. It should be so common. So in my training in MONUSCO, I use examples that pertains to the family system to explain the WPS agenda. Because sometimes when I'm training the men, I let them know that we are not competing. It is a collaborative effort. So when you make it obvious that it is not a competition, because let's face the fact, if even we women, if you are in an appointment and you observe an unhealthy competitor, you become defensive. So when we don't show it as a competition, but it's a collaboration with the men, then that is the beginning of sustainability, where men and women are all churning out the agenda. So the first one I would say is the awareness creation right from the home countries. And secondly, collaboration between the components of the multi-dimensional peacekeeping. Civilian, police, military. It is a collaboration. So when we are doing things disjointed, then we cannot achieve one aim. So in the peacekeeping environment, we must ensure that we collaborate. Then we move on to the local community. Which institution have we empowered to carry on the agenda? So we should empower. The challenge I have observed, if I'm not jumping, is the resources. So we go and we give verbal, education and all that. But when it comes to practicalizing it, you want to empower a woman to be self-sustaining, to be confident. This woman is jobless. She's at the mercy of the same men who are abusing them. It can be vice versa. Then we go and educate them. You need to equip yourself. You need to be confident. Okay, for instance, I'm a fashion designer on my spare time. And for 2 of my peacekeeping missions, I was ready to train for free. There was no resources, and I had to go keep it to myself. So you must resource these institutions to keep the agenda going. If not, it's only going to be a lip service. So I would say collaboration within the force, and then empowering local institutions and creating more awareness and education within the member states right from the grassroots. It should not be a policy for elite. It should be it should come to our realization that it starts from the home. When attitudes are adapted, it's very difficult to change them when the person is grown. That's how we say that you have to focus on raising your children with the right attitude. So we must start from home, and then it will translate into all others. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I think, again, you also bring up very important points, and I think sort of how do we make sure that in a peacekeeping operation we have a consistent approach that is based in the mandate and that also is based on, as you say, a situational awareness and sort of building on and contributing to the context. Mrs. Solignou, you have both experiences in the Central African Republic, but also experiences from situations of drawdown and closures of peacekeeping. Can you share how you see the empowerment?
Yeah, thank you. First of all, I would like to add to what my colleague said. I think ownership is key for sustainability. So all our actions should focus on how the local community and the host country ownership our initiatives. Also, I was talking about the high-level engagement, and I will provide 2 examples. Currently, we are going through an electoral process, and through the consultation of women politicians, for example, parliamentarian, there is a new electoral code that is more gender responsive. Why? Because it has a provision requesting from political parties to respect the parity on the candidate list. And further, this provision requests from political parties to position candidates, male and female candidates, in zebra manner on the list. So, alternatively, male candidate, female, or female, male. That is, a guarantee that we will have more elected women in the municipalities. So, this is the adoption of law. Also, the engagement of the SRG lead to a gender-responsive mandate. We have a strong language on WPS and gender equality. So these are, examples that can be considered as good practices in terms of engagement at high level. And also, the establishment of local committees for peace and reconciliations. The mission supported this establishment and advocated for the representation of women at least 30% in these local committees. So, also, we are in the process of elaborating or developing the 3rd generation of National Action Plan on the UN Resolution 1325. So these are the tools that at the strategic level can be guaranteed, can ensure sustainability, because the host country ownership, and if the mission withdraw, we ensure that there are tools that can ensure the business continuity. So at the local level, as Cecilia said, we provided, because we build capacity for women potential candidates, but how can they be involved or participate without means? So we provided a motorcycle for them as a tool for resource mobilization mean. This, we are sure that at least if we don't give money, but they can use these motorcycles to mobilize resources. You see? So these are strategies that we can use so that sustainability can be ensured at the local level and also at the national level. And nothing can be taken for granted, because many challenges are persistent, because women are still facing discrimination, violence, security and humanitarian issues. So in transition context, I think collaboration, coordination are key with other partners, so that from the start, it's not at the last minute. When the mission are preparing for withdrawal, we start running up and down, but it's not, I think it's a challenge. We need to collaborate from the start with various actors, including UNCT, local organizations, the national entities, because there is a lack or weakness of capacities, and we need to build those capacities along the way so that they are able to take over when the mission withdraw. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you so much. And I think both you and Captain de Souza have really pointed out also the importance of understanding that gender equality dynamics is a local process that is ongoing, to which the peacekeeping can contribute positively. And how do we then build on that, as you say, on these local processes from the outset and make sure. And I know that in a coming panel, we have the leader of the GNWP here, who has worked a lot with localization. So I'm sure we're going to hear much more about that in a coming panel. Finally, Ms. Nishigaya, could you tell us how you see working with empowerment long term? Yes, the 5. Yeah.
Okay, I want to highlight some elements that are critical to consider for sustainability of the effects that the mission have been undertaking and their effects. I think first and foremost, most important aspect is actually respecting the national ownership. The national institutions, including security sector institutions, even though there are some elements that missions still have to engage with those institutions to address, like accountability mechanism. But first and foremost, national institutions and their ownership is something that we are very conscious of, and also investing our recent efforts very intensively. So that's one thing I want to highlight. Secondly, I think partnership and collaboration is something that we also have to incorporate in all the activities that we do. In the context of UN mission in South Sudan, this is all about regional organizations such as African Union, Intergovernmental Authority for Development, IGAD, which is the owner of the peace agreement, as you know. They are the one who facilitated the current peace agreement. And they are the one that set up the monitoring and evaluation mechanism of the peace agreement, and also ceasefire monitoring mechanism as well. So finding out some common agenda which appear in their respective mandates, and also our Security Council mandate for governing the mission are critical, and collaborate as necessary so that we don't have to replicate efforts in a similar manner. So in addition to that, I want to give you just one example from the field. I think I introduced the women's network in the security sector institutions, and that is for creating a positive work environment and the peer support mechanism within the security sector institutions, and especially women who are the minority of those institutions. And there are some stories beyond that, actually. Beyond the individualized security sector institution network, they actually developed a national network of women in security sector. And they elected key offices such as executive director, treasurer, and so on, 5 or 6 key positions. And what I want to highlight is that once you start investing in such network, there is a positive transformational change in their leadership roles, and especially their impact on the peace agreement and mechanism and their mandate that they are delivering. So in the key mechanism called Strategic Defense Review Board, they now incorporate the chairperson of that Women's National Network as one of the decision makers in the country's national security and defense policies. So that's something I want to highlight as a good example. Further, UMIS is working very seriously in the prevention of SGBV and CRSV, conflict-related sexual violence. And I highlighted the fact that we focus on young women as well, and also men, in terms of positive masculinity, because I really want them to shatter the myth of gender is actually equals women, which is a discourse that is always working in the field of peace and also development. In terms of drawdown, I don't have a personal experience in drawdown missions, but in Nepal and Cambodia, I was a witness of drawdown missions. And what I noticed, and perhaps observe and share with you, are the 2 key things that are critical in terms of planning drawdown missions. And one is drawdown phase is very narrow and very short and succinct. So it's a narrow opportunity to invest in the most vulnerable population who are affected by the conflict. That can be women ex-combatants, women who are associated with armed groups, victims of GBV, and IDPs and refugees and returnees. And those are the special groups that requires dedicated attention and investment, so that the recidivism to conflict and using armed violence to resolve differences will not be repeated. Secondly, I think the resilience of the host country institution, especially in terms of human rights awareness, in compliance with international humanitarian law and human rights convention, is very important. Creating such educated and aware community is critical for the long-lasting peace, because they are the ones who will stand up and call for accountability. Their voices are very important. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And I think what you have pointed out on several in the panel is really the need to always include this and make it institutionalized and sort of put it into laws and political reforms and processes to ensure. Ms. Adela, could you tell us how the DPO works with ensuring this in a transition period or a closing of a mission?
Yes, so I will give you the example of Mali. MINUSMA, where we withdraw. It has been an abrupt withdrawal, but notwithstanding, in terms of WPS, we were able to smoothly transition because of our deep collaboration with UN Women on some gender responsive analysis, conflict analysis, which was good. Also about the political participation, so not to the peace process, because after the withdrawal, I mean, the peace process was also abolished by the national actors. But I really want that we also take stock about what happened in terms of WPS after we left. No one talks about that anymore because maybe the way we were asked to leave the country, but because in the peace agreement, it was a precedent for the ones that are aware about what is happening in the Sahel region, and particularly in Mali, it was a precedent of having women for 38% represented and participating at the peace process, at the monitoring of the peace process agreement. And we didn't experience a reversal effect like in Afghanistan, for example, with the changement of the regime. So on the contrary, the women are still there. They are still politically engaged. And maybe we should document also about that. It's not because we left that now we kind of shy away from what we have successfully achieved. And again, it was based on the coordination with the key relevant actors, and in that particular case, in terms of, I'm talking really about the political participation, which was UN Women. Of course, my other colleagues, I mean, Kasumi spoke about conflict-related sexual violence. In Mali, we were more working with UNFPA on that aspect. But coming back to the political participation, because that's what is at the core for peacekeeping, we made sure to have the continuity via UN Women, and there is not only this partnership that is important, but also resources. And the fact that we had also peace-building funds in country helped also not cut the funding, the resourcing of the WPS agenda. So it's really important. Again, back to resources. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And I think you also highlighted the importance of coordinating the policies within the UN system as well, and how we all work together in order to have one consistent. And I think that's really critical. And I think also all of you have brought up, I think the first high-level introductions today really set the forum that we have to discuss both the challenges and also the opportunities and the good examples. And I think you have done that in an excellent way. So let me end very shortly, as we're now coming to the end of this panel. We are only weeks away from the 25th anniversary of 1325. So if you, in less than a minute, should tell us what you think are, like what you would like to see on WPS in the coming 25 years, what would be your key advice? Ms. Andela, please, starting with you.
So as you know, we just had the Pact of the Future in September, where again, member states came together and shared some pledges. So I hope that it will be efficiently addressed. We should not, I mean, it's unfortunate that we are now talking about accelerators and pledges to kind of, we'll say in French, rattraper the 25th years. I mean, we have to accelerate the speed, but I really hope that now everything is really translated in concrete steps. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Nishigaya, what do you like to see?
Yeah, thank you very much. I think WPS has been successfully, well, with some difficulties, really been accelerated to strategic and political positions, even among the political appointees of the UN and among the important member states who are supporting this agenda. I think in the coming 25 years, I want to see this agenda to be more relevant to the solutions of the global issues such as climate change and the emerging trend of the conflicts and their nasty impact on civilians, as well as also peaceful and ethical use of technology. So that's one element. And I also want to call on the attention to the humanitarian issues, ongoing humanitarian issues and declining resources. How can we address this with meager resources? And one of the solutions can be triple nexus, but we need to ensure that WPS is part of that important strategy. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And Mr. Nguyen, please.
Yeah, thank you. I would like to say that when we provided means for women as income-generating activities, we see how they could make difference. They could take over to some issues. So what I would like to say is that women, peace and security agenda or objectives cannot be achieved if it's not supported. There is less support to WPS agenda. There is less interest. So what I would like to say to the member states is to invest more in women, peace and security. Investing in women empowerment and their security have added value for families, communities, and nations. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Captain?
Thank you. As a peacekeeper and a woman myself, I look forward to a time, probably before 25 years, where the WPS agenda and its advocacy becomes a household term and no more just a term for a few. And then I could reminisce with a smile, knowing that I contributed my quota. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Honestly, I'd like to see the future without peacekeeping in coming next 25 years, even though some of us will be lost our job. But anyway, I'd like to emphasize the role of the member state as well. Actually, such as Canada funded the LC initiatives, and Korea also put our fund into some initiatives to empower the WPS agenda, but not only the direct investment or contribution, but also the indirect contribution is also necessary for the WPS agenda as well. For example, AI or satellite technology from the member state is a really important point, not only for the situational awareness, but also for the WPS as well. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I think I'm not even going to attempt to sum up all these brilliant ideas, but I think starting with the fact that women, peace and security is about creating peace, and we all seek to make a difference, and that is well worth the investment of the resources. So with that, I would like to end this panel discussion, so please join me in a warm applause for our fantastic panelists.
Thank you very much for the wide scope of discussions. And the key role of the moderator is great timekeeping, and we were right on the dot. So please give a big round of applause to our moderator. Thank you. So with that, we conclude our first panel discussion, ladies and gentlemen. We'll also have another short break. Thank you to our audiences online as well. And we will